Okay, so Chamu, thank you very much.
Okay, hello, good morning. It's still morning. So I'm Chamu. I've got my long name that I use for publications, so don't bother about that. So I've taken the topic, can AI aid international development? A little bit of background about myself. I trained in law in India and in Madras, so qualified to practice at the High Court in Madras. But I got interested in research, so came on to the UK to do my PhD at the University of Sheffield. My basis is all mainly public law, so constitutional, administrative, international law, and various areas of international law. That I did my PhD quite a while ago. I've been doing quite a few projects after that and started dipping into international development and essentially looking at legal systems of certain countries. I've done work in the south of India. I've done work in Nigeria, in Lagos, and Abuja. And I've done work, I've just recently started work in Kurdistan. All I suppose you would understand in one shape or form as having issues around international development. So that's sort of my sort of lived experience in research so far. Now, as AI sort of hit, I think, the international consciousness, I was wondering about AI and international development. So today's presentation is very much about trying to tease this question out a little bit more. So I don't actually have endpoint solutions, but I've used my knowledge of international law as it intersects with international development to scope out this question. So that's what this presentation is going to be. So if you look at AI and international development and try and get a glimpse of how AI might serve international development, because that's certainly an end that a number of peoples are interested in, a number of countries are interested in, and we express this through international forums like the United Nations, etc. So a lot of examples come up where a lot of solutions can be speeded up, a lot of solutions can actually be provided for cheaper. So, you know, the previous talk we already sort of looked at how it might reduce the billable hours of lawyers, so that means it's cheaper on the user end. And some examples across the board that have been, you know, applied or being applied in the context of a number of development issues. So AI is diagnosing tuberculosis better through cough analysis. So tuberculosis, again, is a health issue, health risk across a number of countries that are, you know, aiming for more development. So malnutrition, again, is something that dogs some countries more than others. So again, a big subject of development that can be assessed better. So certainly it can speed up the way in which solutions for malnutrition are administered, and also how efficiently they are. Medical image analysis, again, because of the vast populations that go through diagnosis and can reduce the length of time. Helping farmers, so agricultural, monitor crops, data analysis. All of this, I think, has been looked at as potential areas where AI can be applied, and therefore international development progressed. Providing personalized learning experience for students in remote areas. So again, accessibility. So education fields, so you've got the health, you've got agriculture, you've got education, disaster response, and aid distribution. Bit controversial around aid distribution, but I think there's quite a few examples, even currently at the moment in Ukraine and in Gaza, around using AI for aid distribution. Social service delivery, so addressing the good and bad of social service delivery. Combating wildlife trafficking, an area that is, you know, absolutely, I think, crying out for help, and it can be done quite well by integrating big data, AI, machine learning, wildlife trafficking. Language translation, I think we all use it. It's quite fun to use it as well sometimes. Energy management. Energy management is, again, a very, very big area. So environment and conservation related and culture related. So all of these come up as potentially where AI can actually help international development per se. So use of artificial intelligence and other, evolving forms of artificial intelligence for development and humanitarian programs, I think is already happening. So that's sort of, the base to see. One approach is to look at how to accelerate these, or what are the challenges, and then potentially what are the limitations or disadvantages of using AI for all of these mentioned solutions. Okay? Now that's something out of my expertise per se. So what I was interested in to see where the field actually lie in terms of what, how AI is immediately being applied for international development, and this gave me a picture. So the next thing to do is really the term international development, again, is a very big term, and depending on where we work, what kind of methodology we use in our work, how we understand international development will actually differ. So here is a perspective that I've put here in terms of the three, I think, the dominant forms of international development that we look at it from a sort of political governance and a legal sphere. So one is the GDP, economic growth. So international development means to grow economically. International development means to be able to get up in that list of countries of having the maximum GDP, of having per capita income, etc. So this is the traditional definition of international development, as you would see, and I think still quite the strong motivator for international development. It gives a lot of incentives to understand international development as economic growth. The indicators are quite well set. Whether we agree with it or disagree with it, it's still, I think, quite the dominant, mode of international development, or dominant understanding of international development. So yes, it's about money, finance. SDGs, so the UN sort of led consensus on sustainable development goals. So our Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals, the one that we are looking at going towards the year 2030. Now this is perhaps a more holistic conception of international development. It does include certain type of targets related to economic growth. So if you look at SDG 1, eradication of extreme poverty, so that will certainly include, fewer jobs, more money, more GDP, so that will also feed in. So SDG in a way subsumes the economic growth as well, but at the same time I think it perhaps makes it a bit more diffuse, essentially needing to take in not just economic growth as an indicator, but also whether we have a clean environment, whether we have clean energy. So all of our 17 SDG goals then give us a more broad and holistic conception. And then there is a more individual-driven conception. So this is a more human rights-driven conception of international development, which is the right to development, whether each and every one of us is developing in the way we actually want to develop, irrespective of whichever country you might be, however collectivist the notion might be. So this is something around bottom-up conception of development, something that is more autonomous, something that is more tailored, something that's more individual, something that's actually happening on a day-to-day basis in every time. I'd also include, and I think this could be quite controversial, but it has got some consensus in international consciousness, because after all we have recognized culture as a key part of growth as well. Although most often when you talk about right to development and culture, the first thing that gets talked about is tourism. Okay, that in a way just again goes towards promoting economic growth, not necessarily my culture or my ability to speak my language, for example, somewhere, etc. So again, a point that has been alluded to in the previous talk as well. So I think we need to bear in mind, if we are talking about international development, we have to assess whether AI could potentially help these three types of international development or conceptions of international development. So maybe this is the point where I would like to throw out a question to you. Where do you think AI might help the most, or is helping the most at the moment, do you think? Do you think it's the economic growth? Do you think it's the sustainable development, the holistic development or right to development? Where do you think AI is contributing?
Can I answer?
Yeah, sure.
I think the latter, the last one. The reason I say that because I was at a session at the UN when I first started, this is back in the last century. The right to development came up. Iran, the diplomats from Iran and Egypt forcefully supported the motion. It was accepted. But then the UK said, okay, great, but one conditionality, and we cannot, ignore. What is the conditionality on right to development? You have the right to my assistance. I'm richer than you. Okay, I will help you. But you cannot say that I will not make progress in certain areas by falling back on my culture, even religion. And that, of course, was taboo for both Iran and Egypt. And it stayed there. So it was adopted, but with this conditionality. And to this day, and I know this when I followed the Alaska meeting between Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin, it came up again. And Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin talked about how do we encourage the third world countries, especially the Islamic countries, to become like us. And they should consider it seriously. They never say that in public. But when they meet together, and they say that. If you want our assistance, you need to become like us.
This is where the autonomy clashes as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the reason I say yes, it will help address this particular, because the young people now, as our barrister here said earlier, the young people, like in my country in Saudi, they are actually pushing this envelope wide open. They're not changing the culture, but they're pushing the envelope. They're allowing the exceptions to happen, and they're doing it quietly. They don't talk about it. And this is what I'm going to mention in my talk. This is where I found out. I saw it in Thailand, I saw it in Lincoln. They're doing it quietly, but they're pushing the envelope wide open. And if it continues, I could say in 20 years from now, maybe by 2030, the end of the SDGs, Muslim countries will be similar to, maybe not like America, but maybe like England, because England is still a right-based community. And that's very attractive for a lot of developed people. The economic model is attractive, as you said, money and finance, but a lot of people are also have concerns. But the right-based model seems to be more diverse in terms of acceptance. Yeah. So yeah, by 2030, 2035, you'll see a lot of changes, a lot of transformations, let's put it that way.
I agree. My initial idea was also that right to development perhaps was a bit more, I think, immediately the beneficiary of AI, as opposed to, I think, SDG in a way, for various reasons, and I might touch on a bit of that. Anyone else?
But I think, from my perspective, I agree with what you're seeing and saying. On the other hand side, I think where it's more perceived, let's say, from the broader spectrum, is more economic growth, right? And I think here it just depends from which lens you're looking at AI development, because one thing is really this, let's say, bottom-up movement that is happening a lot, but that's quiet, right? As you're saying, that's nothing that actually is something everybody's speaking about, or that is publicly very accessible if you look at it from outside of the countries. But what you can see, or what is more publicized, more or less, is the economic growth opportunity that we can see, right? Some countries really start to engage more in the international relations because they now have the opportunity to use the language models for translations, to make products also more accessible, etc., right? So also in terms of talent movement, we see it has its barriers, as we were speaking yesterday, but on the other hand side, it also opens up opportunities because you can translate so easily. You can translate in real time without having a translator, because you have it with you all the time, right? And I think we see a lot of economic growth opportunity at the moment, and we see that some countries can leverage it, but we also see that the big economies like the US are try to ramp it up too fast almost, and the bubble starts bursting already, right? And I think that's an interesting movement where we will see in which direction we go in the end, because there is certainly potential. And think about Malaysia and all of the data centers, for example, right? From an environmental aspect, it's an absolute catastrophe.
When I say economic growth, I'm only saying economic growth. That's the
At the
point,
same
not the
time, it brings money, right? It brings investment into the country. It brings opportunity for basically also growth of the labor market. It brings the all of the shared service sectors brings obviously new markets, new opportunities, right? So I think
that's the way we're doing it, really. We're only doing it based on if there's an economic opportunity, if there's an environment opportunity, we certainly only pick economic opportunity, and then we try to mitigate the fallout of the economic opportunity on the environment. I think that model is set. It's just not, there are critics of the model, but it's not changing. I think it's forging ahead.
If I can add a different perspective, for me the question is actually to look at this word and think about the subject. Who or what is being developed? And for me the biggest change will be the identity. My conception of identity as an individual, as a member of the ecosystem, as a member, am I a data provider, a data user? Am I just data? Am I a person? Am I a dancer? Am I a one of many? And then from that concept, I think is the one that's changing the most for me from AI, is my identity concept, who I am, and which part of me is me and which part is AI. And from that we have options like we heard yesterday about responsibilities, a focus or duties, or dharma, or in identity. But for me that's what's changing. So more than looking at so-called development, and is development a progressive or retrogressive? Are we actually development intrinsically? So can I ask you, are you thinking development is positive? Is it a positive word, or it's just a change? So is the international change better than development, or we're still optimistic that it's actually development?
I mean, I look at it as progress of time, and that's that.
Okay.
Because I think there is good, there is bad, there's up and there's down, but that's constant. I don't think it's actually a trajectory towards the up as we try to set targets and say, you know, I eradicate poverty. But I think, unfortunately, in that process, from the point of view of the individual that you're talking about, I might not necessarily be that happy. I might. So therefore, I think from that perspective, I would say development is a perspective of the passage of time. So literally development of you mentioned dharma, so I'll say yuga, it's just the passage of time as the yuga comes around, the wheel turns.
Yep.
So how do you see the duality of use of AI in international development for individual and the system?
Yeah, I think AI is, knocking at the door of international development to say, when it comes to individual, there's no two sides of the coin, because I am both the duty holder as well as the rights holder.
Right.
Okay, so that separateness is not there. But when you look at international development, it's always separate. I might be the duty holder, someone else may be the right holder. Okay, so if it's an individual saying AI, then I have the duty to skill myself up, and I also am the beneficiary of that as well.
Correct.
So I think from a methodological point of view, there is that sort of a divide when you're talking about international development at arm's length, because international development is about making it happen for someone else. If I, improve myself, that's not international development, that's not my development, that might be my growth, but that's not necessarily what we are looking at in terms of international development, right?
So my follow-up, not concern, a comment probably you might like to reflect is, where do you see, when you say it is progress of others and international development, so how do you see the the AI responding to the stewardship issues when they come, in terms of holding the responsibility towards development? Whose
Okay.
responsibility it is?
I think perhaps some of the slides later on might, take in all that. So let's see.
Okay.
Keep that thought in your mind.
Good.
Thanks for that. Thanks for the
Can I
Yeah.
throw another question?
Yeah.
This is really amazing. I'm really happy that you're here. Because these questions have always been on my mind and I didn't know what to talk about. My preference is that I would like to be unique in this world. I don't want everyone to look like me, nor do I want to look like everybody else, because I would be bored in my mind. So I believe that society has to distinguish between the duty holders and the beneficiaries. Yes, because as an individual, I have my goals and I want to pursue them. But I know at the national level, the SDGs, that's for everybody. So me, I prefer diversity. The nation, actually, for society to work, everybody has to be the same. So I can see we have to balance between individual rights, duty holders, and also the other side. And this is, I think, where is the stumbling block right now. There's no agreement. When I talk to government people, they want everyone to be the same. Same religion, same thoughts, same identity. Don't change the identity. And I understand that society will not work without one single identity. As soon as you throw in a whole bunch of people together and they all pursue their own different things, which is great, makes them happier, the government starts like, what if they go this way, if they go that way, I will lose control. Especially when it comes to women. I don't want women spreading their children all over the place. I don't want men spreading their wives all over the place. I don't want. And this is, I think, the stumbling block right now for international development. There is no international agreement. Which one takes precedent? Individual rights, individual goals, or national goals? And the Americans are, the answer, individual. Entrepreneurship is more important than the rest of society. We don't care. As long as I'm making money, I can hire, fire, do whatever I want. Germany, on the other hand, and England and France, they're more right-based. No, you can't do that. Yeah, people have rights, union labors, pensions, all of those things are really, really important because, it helps society stay resilient.
I think that's where the economic growth actually does help us, because at least there's a common story there. At least there's no difference when it comes to the dollar, or there's no difference when it comes to the pound. It's just one. So, isn't that where sort of, because Saudi is now diversifying their economy, and that's the route in which there's diverse voices being heard as well. But as long as that story occupies the government, I suppose that's in a way our shield for diversity. Sometimes I think economic growth is actually a shield for diversity from that perspective. Because as long as, we all have the ability to be able to do our own things, we all have the ability to build our own temples or mosques or gurudwaras, that's fine. And that's only going to happen because we do need to have that, we do need to have the pounds and the dollars and other things. So the fact that there's a focus, at least at the international level, on trade, on economy, except of course take Trump out of the thing and tariffs out of the thing, then trade actually is flowing freely, right? So I have a feeling that I think that's where we are in terms of saying, when we have problems with how we deal with some of the differences, then at least we can join together to say we all are interested in making money, we all are interested in consumption,
yes.
Which is what scares me the most in the Anthropocene, because we are steaming ahead, trying to address that, when I think that is a huge problem for our own sustainability. But that will come a little bit later in the slides.
Okay, Indira, you have.
I was just thinking about a couple of years ago, the scandal with the Oxfam that model,
Oh yes.
and that benevolence,
Yeah.
which is kind of goes in something along the lines of what you were saying about development, and that kind of it's abuse of power. It's about taking advantage of people who don't have the means to be able to empower themselves. And if you're looking at AI, then are they actually, if it's international development, then AI is driven by dominator models, by which we heard yesterday. I think 69.5% of people in AI are males. So if you've got that, then you put that into the development field. You get the example of Oxfam, and I'm sure there are others as well. So where is the ethics in all of this, where you're supposed to be there empowering people, but actually you're taking advantage of their vulnerability? And where is AI going to come into all of this? Because does AI have a consciousness? Who's going to actually create a consciousness within AI? I mean, I'm just asking some
I think at the
questions.
moment there is no safeguards, there are no guardrails. And you see it every time you go into transitional economies and areas which are post-conflict zones, and the Oxfam story is not an outlier. Very sad to say, but it's not outlier. I mean, I've just come back from Kurdistan where we were discussing the Yazidi genocide and what's happening 11 years on since the Yazidi genocide there. And they're trying to push hate crime bill through the Iraqi legislature because there is currently 25% of all the comments on the Yazidi genocide is, when will the next genocide happen? We want it. So it's...
I think we were saying yesterday,
it's scary.
We seem to learn, the human race doesn't seem to learn from history, whether that's long-term history or...
So yeah, I mean, international institutions of the civil society sort or of the governmental sort, and their ethical, responsibilities in international development is a very under-discussed area. I think that's the urgent need at the moment, is to really discuss and understand. Because the immediate response is there's a group of people who work in these zones and areas and who know these areas, but the rest of the world just leaves it to that group. And I think that's where Oxfam and that kind of predatory practice sort of grew, because nobody else actually knows. It's a black box for us. Haiti, black box. Yemen, black box. Iraq. I mean, where I was now is, it felt like I was in London. But before I got there, everybody was saying, well, you're going to a conflict zone. No, I'm not. So I think we do have a duty to really understand areas where international development funds are going, and I think that's a key issue. As far as international organizations and AI in international development, that's a topic perhaps I'll also look into. Yes.
Well, I can see it right now. But it's very interesting, and we should talk about it constantly.
So then, like I said, the next sort of foray into the question of, does AI aid international development is from my own disciplinary expertise, which is, as lawyers, as litigators, or as legal reformers, the question we're asking is who is responsible for something. And when we say who's responsible for something, we mean it in a binding way. So we ask the question, whose duty is it to ensure international AI and military use? So I think this is the right way to go about it, because this is an exclusive domain of the UN, of the international community. And it's got some very good kernels of thought. There has been, the drivers of that have been very conscious about where war might be going using AI. So I think the march is in the right direction, and it's come quite quick. I mean, we produce a lot of resolutions, but still, the fact that it's gone from a general AI resolution to a specific one in less than like 12 months is actually pretty good. So these are my thoughts around building the legal perspective, because again, I'm looking at it from the international law perspective, which is really quite broad and fraught. And at the moment, what UN is doing, there is a UN AI for Good program. I wanted to look a little bit more about what the approach is that the UN is taking. Not surprisingly, it's very much sort of led by the Swiss government, and they meet yearly. It's a bit like a networking summit about for AI. There's a lot of different AI developers who are do-gooders, just like how the program is talking about, who come together. So I think at the moment the way UN AI for Good program is working, and it's got some time to do it this way, is just randomly bring together what everyone thinks, it's just a free-for-all. And it happens yearly. The next summit is 2026, and you can also attend it virtually for free. You can register, or you can go to Geneva and attend that as well. But my thoughts around linking this to the legal perspective, linking this to the duty of states perspective, I think some of what AI for Good program is doing is trying to make ineffective programs work effectively through AI, or hoping that it might work.
Example, please.
Yeah, there are way too many, and I don't want to point at different states. I think we'll have a conversation after this about different programs, but there are, and I can give you examples. So don't believe that AI has some sort of new knowledge that could, change things around for programs that are not effective. That's the sort of main headline. So use AI to supercharge existing interventions that actually do work. But of course, there are some critics for that, because it can be seen as a way of extending, project leaders' jobs, projects' jobs, and certain countries that have been in the limelight. So it actually does raise criticisms about why are you focusing so much on already existing programs. So highly political, but despite that risk, I still say, I think where we stand now, we need to look at existing interventions, because that's gone through monitoring processes, that's time tested, and that has involved actual checks and balances and standards work that is pre-AI. And I think for now, at the UN level, that is probably the most we can defend, throwing money into. So for now, as I speak in September 2025, I would say that this is where it should go. And the UN AI for Good program, if it is going to throw more resources into things, then it needs to be way more cautious than it is at the moment. And then I'm going to look at some sectoral concerns, just a couple of them. So I think one, we've already picked up on this, I think, is the AI bias. So if you're looking at, like in the UK, we are looking at how things are included, excluded. So yesterday's example of, if I go through the e-gates, my face is not recognized, or then the other example of the 33 or 34% chance of not recognizing a black face in any kind of facial recognition software, etc. So all of those, biases, etc., are built in. So that is at a country level. We can take charge of it. But this is going to be compounded, I think. And what does that compounding mean? Are we actually going to ignore whole countries as a whole? That means that it's going to be huge black holes. So essentially, we're looking at if AI bias is compounded, and if it's exponentially amplified, that means we are looking at whole regions completely being left out. So for example, maybe small island developing countries, right? The whole of those countries in the Pacific Island who are already, at the huge risk of probably disappearing in another 20, 30 years due to climate change, might then actually disappear from our own consciousness as well. So we need to think of not AI affecting international development in terms of bias and prejudice as, if it is here in the UK, it'll be similar in another country. Actually, the impacts of that might be compounded, and it might be exponential. So that's something to think about. And I'm going to be looking a little bit more about which whole nations, which means we're thinking about languages, we're thinking about cultures, we're thinking about histories, we're thinking about archaeologies, we're thinking about the history of whole parts of mankind that could actually be erased because of the way bias is actually built. And bias, again, is different from prejudice. You know, bias could be inadvertent, whereas prejudice is definitely not inadvertent. And I think that is something that's more dangerous, and we need to think about it specifically and differently from bias. And for international development, definitely prejudice, just the example that you were giving, become like us, means that there's a prejudice against being who you are. You know, I don't like the fact that this is how you deal with your family, like this in your country. So that is actual prejudice. Unfortunately, in Europe, I think in the political scene, prejudice is now gaining votes as well. And that might be something that we really need to guard against. And then my final slide, another issue. For me, this is really the main reason why I'm even looking at AI, is because of AI and whether it can exist within planetary boundaries. So now I'm talking about the geological concerns about the fact that we may be changing the whole nature of the planet, taking us out of the Holocene into what's known as the Anthropocene. So that is, it's got nothing to do with whether we have economic development, whether we have cultural development, sustainable development. It doesn't matter. There is, you know, a whole different will at action over here, which could just subsume all of us. But the starting point for that is really to look at, can we have development without sustainability? Yeah, it's very much a part of a business paradigm now, unfortunately. And even SDGs are very much part of the business paradigm, and sustainability, again, is a business paradigm. Now, the question I want to ask is AI itself unsustainable? For me, that is, I think, the clearest answer. I think AI itself is unsustainable. It's environmentally unsustainable. Water resources, in terms of energy resources, even if you have renewable energy, a lot of the AI now, you know, is going renewable, and some blockchains have gone completely renewable. A lot of people who work in blockchain work in AI because the skill sets are all advanced, so they all work together. However, what are the how can you actually be renewable and be sustainable? Just because you have solar panels, just because you have wind turbines, you're not actually sustainable. Because just go to Chile, just go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, just look at how materials are mined, just look at your critical minerals, just look at your rare earths. It's simply not possible. So I think AI can only be sustainable if you can bring about a resource norm in the world. So what I mean by resource norm is you can only consume 10,000 kilograms of this for this year here in South Hall, and that's it. And then we need to have that everywhere around the world. This is a ration economy, completely not really suitable for the current economic model, but unfortunately, until we have that reining in of our use of resources, I think AI is going to be unsustainable. And we are not going to stay within what's the safe operating zone of the planet, I think. So I have a very bleak assessment of development and environment and AI, in the sense that AI is unequivocally bad for our sustainability and environment. So we need to do something about that. So yeah, thank you very much for participating.
Okay, thank you. Mina, please. Yeah.
Sorry. We are too close of a friend, so we will bounce off ideas with each other. You hit on quite good points. I go back to my initial question when you said your thoughts, and I'll come back to. So one of the things when you say, when we were discussing about this idea of individual versus stewardship model in the beginning. So do you think that AI would be used as a compensatory justice for a bigger stewardship justification, that we have, like the last example, you are only going to have 10,000 gallons of this and that, then you can't go beyond. So how do you see that AI could be used as compensatory justice either at individual level or at national level for international development? That's my first question to you. And the second one was, when you say you don't, it looks very bleak when it comes to international development. So my question, or it's not question, it's a comment that I want you to reflect on. Do you think that AI will be used more as an efficiency tool or for measuring effectiveness in international development?
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Interesting in terms of whether we could use AI to create perhaps resource norms, because that would be stewardship. I don't think AI is going to add anything to our discussion of resource norms. I don't think AI is going to be able to get that traction for, just because they're not really seeing the role of AI. The people who discuss AI don't necessarily talk about resource norms. They're not coming together. But if they do come together in a platform, right?
Even if they don't have resource implication, like we heard the barristers talk in the morning about language, right? So do you think that if not being able to use language in the legal system, for example in Bangladesh, or even in India, I mean, I don't think so Bengali or any other language is so much integrated in the legal system within India, that it could be used as a tool against that we can't do. We can't provide justice to people on a reasonable time frame then.
Yeah.
Because we don't have systems built in. So the whole point is circulation of the same.
So I'll stay on the same thing about AI and resource norm. So AI can actually help more people express their concern about runaway resource use through different languages. I think that will help in the sense it can actually bring up more voices. So potentially it's not just WWF, which is the only organization talking about resource norms at the moment, but maybe there could be a little bit more of that in vernacular or local or non-English lingua around the world talking about this in their own language. So I think that can happen.
Okay.
That can help. And your second point was about
effectiveness
and efficiency. I think efficiency for sure. Effectiveness, I don't think it'll add anything. Is my view.
So how do you see the use of data analytics churning out the results very quickly then? And for SDGs, for example?
I think evidence-based legal decisions or evidence-based policy making is not as rampant necessarily. We have a number of different mechanisms which we use as evidence. For example, in law we use things like legal constructs. So we don't necessarily need actual evidence. Judges will actually make legal constructs. A reasonable man is like a general legal construct. Outside of the law, people might think, why don't you actually go and ask a reasonable man, do a survey or something. But we don't use that technique when we decide on certain legal principles and apply them. So we don't actually need, so data comes in where you need the evidence, where there is a strong tradition of using evidence we don't necessarily see that bottom up, because evidence is built up bottom up. Data is collected from a number of sources. That's not the methodology in which we actually apply legal principles. Because what we're saying is, in law, we do say it is the ought. Even if a single person doesn't agree to it or doesn't accept it, it will still be there because it's the ought. So we do have a very archaic sort of tradition. And I support that to a large extent as well, because we are where we are because how our legal systems have worked for us. A lot of time we forget it. Legal systems are like skeletons, right? You don't think about it, but if it's not there, society will collapse. So in that sense, I believe I've now drifted off, so I hope you got some answer out of that. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question on that.
First, Justin.
Okay. Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Okay. The first thing, your statement that international law has prevented the Third World War. I think I might disagree with that. I think Gandhi might agree with me. What has stopped the Third World War is the European has become civilized. Okay. If you look. In the Ukraine war, for instance, Europe was pining for a war with Russia. Okay? the rest of the world let Europe know that we are not interested. We are not going to join you. It's not going to be like the Second World War where we're going to take sides with you. And to its credit, America also restrained. Yeah? That is what stopped the Third World War now, not international law, because Europeans were citing how international law has been breached by Russia. Okay? So I'm not sure whether international law really has stopped any war, really, in a way. It has created hegemony, power for certain countries and certain people. Okay? I mean, I don't know where it's. I mean, I think one of the things I admire about Trump is he's basically told Europe, go away. Your ideology, you keep it, you pay for it, you can do it. We are not interested. Okay? We may not like what Trump is doing. Essentially, America was being run by Britain and Europeans. Okay? All their ethics about this democracy, sociology, the human rights, etc. You find in almost all American think tanks there are British people there, and the British are addicted to war. Okay? 550 years, you won't find a single year when they haven't been at war. Yeah, it's the only country which has been war continuously for 550 years without a single year when they have not been at war. Okay? So that's one thing. Law then itself, whether it's going to help development, etc., it's a political tool in the end. Okay? The law is a fiction created by man. It's a political tool. Cultures that have come from Abrahamic religions, whether it's Europe or Islam or Judaism, they're all legalistic because the first thing was law created by God for man. You don't find that in Indian civilizations or other civilizations. Now, you take in India, you find people like the Nangasads, okay, or the Nihangs. We find some now here today. You can see them. They don't pay train fare. They don't pay anything. And you and me, if we don't pay train fare in India, we'll probably end up in, fine or in a prison. They don't care. And the police don't touch them. They don't touch many of these people. So how extensive is the law? What does the law do there? Okay? So that's my comment on law. At the UN, on development again, there is development and there's contentment. Okay? That's one of the big differences between what the UN is trying to drive at, and in all the 17 SDGs, it hasn't really got the concept of contentment. Okay? Now, I come from a region in India where the average life was about 80 years old, even before medical science came. Okay? Just a good, healthy living. They were content. They did small farming, and they were happy. Okay? So medical science has not really increased their age. It has increased the age for many other Indians or many other people in the world. So contentment was the main thing in Indian civilization again. It's not about perpetual development. It's an internal development. So again, we don't see that here. With development, when you're chasing development, I said this in a platform in India, or in UN, and the Indian ambassador or their representative wasn't very happy. I said India is now the 4th largest economy in the world, but it cannot feed 70% of its population. Okay? What is the point of being a 4th largest? Because India is chasing development, GDP. Okay? Chasing GDP, and 70% of the people can't feed. Okay? And I said, well, they've got to put a slip of paper they can put in a ballot box every 5 years. When you compare with China, which has reduced poverty and hunger from 90% to 3%, within 40 years. You don't get the right to vote, but at least you get food, okay? Which is what every family would want. Okay? We are pushing for SDGs for civil society. As you know, the UN is all states and everything. Even now, the SDG system there is orientated towards the countries, not civil society. Okay? I think we've got support from a few countries now that they have to change and bring in a new dimension, SDG for civil society. We're sort of becoming SDG on the for the populations. Okay, that if you look at the SDGs and the descriptions and things like that, it's very state orientated. there's nothing there which encourages, let's say, an organization like this one or anyone and say, we are meeting SDGs. Okay? And there isn't a system which captures this as well. Okay? So we're pushing for that. And we're then pushing for SDG certification. So what they're doing is they're marking the countries are filling this, but there's no SDGs, it's self-certification. I know your university has certified itself as meeting certain SDGs. A lot of universities have self-certified themselves as meeting SDGs. Whether they are meeting or not is another matter.
Complex.
Yeah.
More than universities.
So those are things we are doing, and I think anthropocentric thing. I'm not sure. I think AI might be a little better at breaking through that. Yesterday I said that I did a little bit of a ChatGPT question, and it came up with some extraordinary responses which I wouldn't even get from any person informed by the UN, etc. And the UN is very anthropocentric. Almost everything is anthropocentric. But if AI has a more wider input, I think it's more likely to become non-anthropocentric. So,
A few things to reply to.
Yeah, and I'm learning a few things, so that's great. No, thanks. First point, brief. To me, the other name for international law is really law for the Westphalian states, and Westphalia is, where countries came together 400 years ago. It's a place in Germany where international law was forged. So international law really is the law of Europe, and that says a lot about its focus on war. I think I'm on the same page with you in terms of what I think about international law, standing outside international law. And that's why I, work in international law to actually make it really international. International, intercultural, much more resonant or in the Anthropocene. And that's how I approach the law. The second point about, law itself, is law a tool? And this is where legal pluralism, I think, is very, very important, because we look at law as a unifying, as harmonizing force. We need law and order, or law is there only for order. Law is not really there for, my own individual evolution, to give me that space to be able to grow the way I want. But that's where the legal pluralism has to. It's a very, very tough area in the modern economic world, because without common rules, the economy is not going to run. But unfortunately, the economy is what sort of runs roughshod, I think, over specificities. So my own perspective on the law is to be able to promote legal pluralism. Means I'm thinking about customary laws. I am thinking about nature-based laws. I am thinking about rights of nature. I'm thinking about all those different concepts which actually can be within the scope of the law as such. SDGs, state-based, absolutely just a result of the methodology. But of course it has a huge impact in terms of putting states out there. They're not even interested in SDGs as such. It's only come about because people's communities and individuals are interested in that, because it's just outside of general sovereign domain to talk about all of that. But I'm really gratified to hear that. I think that's the way to go. There's really no point in doing a third iteration of another DG goals after 2030 if it's going to be state-based, because it's just, again, I think, creating a lot of jobs where a lot of data has been collated to say I have, because the whole idea of fulfilling SDGs in India seems to be a lot more jobs in collecting data, not actually doing the stuff. That's because the country has to report. And you're right, Nigeria and India has a competition. Which country houses the largest number of poor people in the world? If you look at 5 years ago, it was Nigeria, 3 years ago, India. I think last year was still, again, Nigeria. So they keep yo-yoing between. So that has remained constant. And I still remember when I, first came to Japan and I was at the United Nations University, we had the head of UNCTAD, the UN Conference on Trade and Development, come, and he said, when I first joined this department, there were 25 least developed countries. Now there are 50 least developed countries. We've not done anything in international development, the way you look at it. So I think through states, it's not possible, but there is a stranglehold. The structure of international law is such that it recognizes only states. But I think the civil society, I like the fact that there is a lot of mobilization, But the big blind spot, and we need to really address this, is the power next to states, or even more than states, is basically the corporate sector. And we need to make sure that we actually get them into the spectrum of international law. More than civil society being active, if we can get your multinationals or the business and corporates, then I think we will make much better strides in SDGs than if we mobilize action from the bottom. So that's what I feel. But thank you so much.
That's what Kofi Annan said, actually, long time ago. Exactly that point. Get the corporate sector on board.